unsatisfied with just a cottage below, a little silver and a little gold. But in that city where the sun will shine, I want a gold one, that silver one. I've got a mansion just over the hilltop in that far land where we'll never go. And someday yonder we will never go wander, but walk the streets that are pure as gold. Don't think me poor or deserted or lonely. I'm not discouraged. I'm heaven bound. I'm just a pilgrim in search of a city. I want a mansion, a robe and a crown. I've got a mansion just over the hilltop in that bright land where we'll never grow old. And someday yonder we will never more wander, but walk the streets that are pure as gold.
In that same chapter, we're still in Mark 5. Let's back up to verse 24. And this sort of puts an emphasis on what I was just talking about. A great multitude followed him and thronged him. I mean, they were just, you couldn't walk for the people, the attention that was growing. Now, verse 25, a certain woman had a flow of blood or hemorrhage, we would probably call it, and she'd had this for 12 years. It's interesting, that it tells us here in the next verse that she had suffered many things from many physicians. Sometimes we feel that way today, even with the technology, right? The doctors, rather than helping you, it's a lot of suffering. They don't always do the right thing. But back in this day, all sorts of crazy ideas that these folks had. Many times rather than helping you get better, I suspect that they killed a lot of people, even though their intentions were good. But it's interesting that she still had not given up. She spent all that she had and was no better, verse 25, but rather she grew worse, sort of helpless and hopeless in that sense. When she heard about Jesus, verse 27, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. That may have been the best that she could do. To get that close to him probably was a struggle anyway. And yet, it's interesting that seems to have been her goal, was just to touch his garment, believing that if she could have done that, then it would help her with the problem. There also may have been a sense of shame that went with the problem that she had. And so she was embarrassed maybe to have her story or her situation known. She said in verse 28, "If only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well." And immediately the fountain of blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the affliction, or saved from the plague, maybe your translation says. So here she was. She'd had this affliction. Likely physically she was probably very pale because her blood stayed low. Also, according to the Jewish law, she would have been considered unclean, and had been that way for all of this particular period of time. So there were certain places she couldn't go, certain things she couldn't do because of this continual loss of blood that she had. And yet, she had a very, very strong faith and confidence that if she could just get that close, that indeed she might have some relief, or that she might be made well. So Jesus, of course, was sensitive even to the touch. And it's interesting what is said there. Jesus, knowing in himself that power had gone out of him, verse 30, he turned around to the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" But his disciples said, "You see the multitude thronging you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see her who had done this thing. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. What she's probably trying to avoid happened. Her story came out. And he said, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction." Now here's one of those incidences where her faith made all the difference. We've talked about that a little bit, that there were other situations where faith had nothing to do with what Jesus did in performing a particular miracle. We talked about situations where faith of somebody else made a difference in getting that particular person into the presence of Jesus. But here's a situation where, because of her faith and her belief in Jesus and his power, that resulted in the healing of her. And he refers to her as daughter, evidently emphasizing his care and his concern for her. So after 12 years of suffering with this hemorrhage, now she is made whole. And a situation where Jesus had a concern for everybody. One of the things that you see in looking at the list of people that Jesus had, there's one text that says that he didn't turn anybody away. Obviously, Jesus did not heal everybody. There were still folks that were sick and people that were coming. But Jesus had a great sympathy and compassion for everybody. And we see that especially, I think, in his attitude towards women and children. In this particular day, many times the women especially were treated as second class. In John chapter 4, you remember the Samaritan woman at Jacob's well. They were astonished that Jesus, a Jewish man, would even talk to a lady. Well, here's a situation in public. The Jewish men didn't talk to women, and yet Jesus did. So we see not only the miraculous power of the Son of God, but we also see that Jesus elevated those that had leprosy that nobody wanted to do anything with. He elevated the status of women to where they should have been anyway. He was concerned about children. So he sets, I think, for us a beautiful example of the attitude that we should have towards all people, regardless of their nationality, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of their sex, regardless of what kind of a sinful life they may have lived, what their situation may be. Jesus did not, remove himself from anybody. He was willing to help, and he was willing to serve regardless. Anybody with a thought, comment there on that particular idea? Right. Yeah. We have to be in contact with Jesus. It's a good point. And we have to, and of course we're dealing with the spiritual aspect of it. And that brings us back, and I've tried to mention this every so often, we get so caught up sometimes in the miracles and those types of things that we maybe forget that his point was the spiritual. He was healing these folks. He was raising the dead, but that was just a means to the end. And the same thing we have to remind ourselves in our service as well. You know, why do we visit the sick? You know, why do we cook food? You know, why do we do these things? You know, why do we help people that, you know, are in a financial strait? Why do we give away food? All of that is a means to the end. And if we forget that, then basically it brings us down just to being good folks. We're helping people. But we've got to help people with the intention of letting that lead to an invitation to our services or to talk to somebody about their soul and to try to teach and try to lead and try to instruct. So that's why the miracles were very limited. That's why there are no miracles today. There's really, there was a purpose of it for it during this particular time to show who Jesus really was and the power that he had. But it was simply a limited thing for a limited time to do what needed to be done. And but it was not the end result. Another thing too, in talking about this particular lady, because of the issue of blood, and you can go back to Leviticus 15 and read of all the different things that made a person unclean. You know, there were all sorts of things touching. If you had a death in the family and you helped prepare the body, and you touched the dead body, you were considered unclean for a period of time. A lady giving birth to a baby. There were just all kinds of things. But here was this lady that wouldn't have been very popular because she'd been considered unclean for 12 years running. And yet Jesus was concerned about her and was concerned about anybody that had a particular issue. Her faith also, I think, is maybe seen in the fact also that she just wanted to touch his garment. That she was not, she didn't want to trouble him. She didn't want to put him out. You know, if I can just get close enough to touch him, this must have been very refreshing to Jesus to see somebody that had this kind of faith, because he was constantly dealing with the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes and the hierarchy among the Jewish people who were so self-righteous and who you know, were just looking at different ways to tear him down. And then to have this lady who had such a faith and a confidence and a humility about her must have been enlightening and refreshing as well. Anybody else with a thought there? Because she was unclean? Yeah. That was a part of their culture, and it would have affected how she dealt with things as well. You're right. Chuck? One way or the other. Yep. One way or the other, it was tied in, wasn't it? Wasn't always the person being healed, but sometimes it was others. We talked about Jairus' little girl, you know. Common tie. Believe in Jesus as the Christ. And that was the goal also, wasn't it? It's to develop a faith or a belief in Jesus as the Son of God. And once that was done, then what he was teaching, you see, was respected and honored. And so, you know, a belief in God today, a belief in Jesus as the Christ, leads us to, you know, a confidence in the Scriptures, which then, if we'll study them and apply them, then so our faith is there, and our faith increases and grows, you see. Anybody else? Okay, let's go back to Matthew 9, as we try to keep some of these things in order here as we come to them. If you've got a chronological Bible, you can sometimes on the same opening it has these passages there that help a little bit. But we want to look at Matthew 9, verse 27. Here where two blind men are healed, and this is the text that Stephen read for us there a minute ago. Two blind men followed him, crying out and saying, "Son of David, have mercy on us." So as Jesus traveled, people would follow him. The woman that had just touched him, you know, she was following in the crowd. They cried, "Son of David, have mercy on us." They had come to believe in him. And when he'd come into the house, the blind men came. And Jesus said, "Do you believe that I'm able to do this?" And they said, "Yes, Lord." He touched their eyes, saying, "According to your faith, let it be so." So if they'd not been honest and truthful, you know, as far as their faith is concerned, obviously they would not have been healed. Their eyes were open, verse 30. He warned them not to tell anybody, but they departed and spread the news in all of the country. And of course, this brought more attention to Jesus. Then he moves on to another individual in verse 32, a man who was mute and demon-possessed. And we talked about that a little bit from the standpoint that during this period of time, there were demon possessions that was evidently allowed by God. Evil spirits of the dead that were wicked. I don't know what terminology or thought might be the best to describe that. But here is a fellow that because of that, he was mute, he could not speak, and he was healed by Jesus. And they said it was never seen like this in Israel. And of course, Israel had a history of prophets and others that had been able to perform miracles and do different wondrous things with God's power behind them. But they recognized that this was something different. But the Pharisees said he cast out demons by the ruler of demons. So they tried to figure out some way to deny this, and obviously it was a ridiculous argument. Jesus was not working for Satan, against Satan. And he makes that argument to showing that it was just something that was plumb silly for them to say and ridiculous, and yet they were trying in any way that they could to pull him down and to discredit him. Anybody with a thought there? Say it again. Is that why the demon possession was allowed? Well, it seems to have at least been a part of it, that it was allowed during this time to show God's power in all areas, and even over the spiritual realm, the power was there as well. And thus the demons were cast out by Jesus, and they recognized him. You remember the ones that was cast out of the pigs that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. They recognized Jesus and testified as to who he actually was. And that Jesus had the power over the physical as well as the spiritual, showing that he was indeed the Son of God. Yeah, exactly. So it was a crazy argument, wasn't it? In a lot of ways, but they couldn't deny the power, could they? They couldn't deny the power, so they simply tried to pass it off. But it really showed, that there was a spiritual disorientation, so to speak, that to think of it in that direction, that it was the acts of the devil, working against the devil. So it was just plumb silly, really, and anybody that was thinking properly would know better. But Jesus, was able to show and to illustrate that indeed he was the Son of God, and he had power over the physical, the material. He could feed the 5,000 and the 4,000. He could make a couple of fish and a little bread, enough to feed 4,000 or 5,000 people. He could cast out the evil spirits if a person was sick, or even if a person died. The miracles were a great variety, showing that he had the power over any circumstance. And that there was nothing that Jesus did not have power over. So just a variety of different problems and issues, in contrast to those that claim to be able to perform miracles today. Very, very limited, and many times those things that you really can't see, the things that you can't measure, are the type of miracles that are claimed today. And these were such that even the enemies recognized the power. Good point. Anybody else? Yeah. Well, if you look at what in the Great Commission in Matthew 28, where he gives them that commission, or is it Mark's account that he gives the power? Is it Mark's account? (28:18). Yeah. There's one of them. Which is the account? That's in the commission, right? Matthew 10. And Mark 6. Okay. So there's several accounts where they had the ability to do it as well. Oh, did they do it? That's Mark 6. And they actually did it. Okay. 2 by 2. And what we call the limited commission. Okay. I was thinking also that there was another passage that indicated the power that they had, but on one occasion that they were unable to. Yeah.
So they had a hearing to have it, cast out demons, so they can go.
That they didn't. I finally found what I was thinking about in Mark 16, verse 17. And he says, "And these signs will follow those who believe. In my name they will cast out demons. They will speak with new tongues. They will take up serpents. If they drink anything deadly, it will be by no means hurt them. They will lay hands on the sick and they will recover." So yes, it was passed on to the apostles. And then the apostles had the opportunity to lay hands on others. But that's where it stopped. When those folks passed away, then the miraculous ability or power came to an end. I don't think you have any particular cases. I don't think of one where but yeah, that one situation where they came to Jesus and there was a faith issue there. Yes, James? Okay. And that's Luke 9? Yeah, he gave them the power. Okay. 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 I didn't hear everything you were saying, but you know, the point being, I think, to the question here is that yes, this ability was passed on. There may not have been specific cases where a person, had a spirit cast out later, as there were in the life of Jesus, but as several passages that you pointed out show that they still had that ability. Exactly. Power, we don't have that power today, your point, right? Oh yeah. There's people who believe a lot of things that are not founded on the Bible. Don't doubt their honesty, but it's not biblical. Bob? Yeah, exactly. There was a reason for it.
Yeah, there was a reason for it. So we had to revisit it. In that situation, it was necessary for this kind of thing to happen.
And even later, because the Bible had not been written, and they were in the process of doing that, so still to give credit that he was the Son of God, and then to give credit to the apostles that they were servants of the Son of God. Where today we can turn to the Bible and show they can do that. Okay, our time is come and gone according to that. Yep, there's that bell. Okay, Acts 16:18, Libby says, there is a case where the Apostle Paul actually did do something. Okay, Acts 16:18. I couldn't think of one. We'll start there, and then we'll move into Matthew 10. Okay, next week, so you can continue reading there in Matthew 10.
Reach out and touch the Lord.